Okay, I'm going to get us started. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rebecca Goldberg. I'm the co-facilitator of the Grantmakers for Education Out of School Time Impact Group, along with Kathleen Trapphagen, who's on the line. And I am really happy to see you all here today. I think we're going to have a good sized group. Today, we are kicking off a series of fall conversations in these monthly stakeholder calls, focus on the workforce for youth development, youth services, out of school time, after school field. I think it's on top of everybody's mind right now as programs have been opening for fall. And we know there's a labor shortage across the country in all industries, and it's particularly hitting our industry pretty hard in terms of programs being able to hire anyone, but also high quality staff, and the impact that's having on serving as many kids and families as programs really want to. So wanted to share that today is the first of 3 conversations that we're teeing up. So today is in September. We're going to skip October because of the GFE conference, but today we'll focus on what we're calling views from the field, workforce challenges, solutions, and policy implications. And then in November, on November 19th, we're going to focus on supporting BIPOC leadership, so pathways for diverse staff in the field to advance. And then in December, we're going to look at structural changes to support the workforce, so a little bit more of the infrastructure and systems level. And those conversations are still being shaped, but you can see we're sort of moving through different levels of issues around the workforce challenges. So today our goals are to uplift some proximate voices and perspectives on the current challenges and promising responses and solutions that we're seeing locally. We also will identify some of the policy implications and potential opportunities. We'll probably go more into this in December, but just sort of, some of the emerging opportunities that are being identified. And then we'll have some time in breakout groups to then, you'll hear from a few folks across the country and then just hear in your own community, is this resonating? What else are you seeing challenge-wise, and as well as models for solutions and or policy implications. So we'll have a chance to talk about that in a more local context. I want to just remind you all that we're glad you're registered for these calls. We are trying to clean up the mailing list since we've had this mailing list since the beginning of the pandemic. So what we're doing is we're asking everyone to re-register, and you'll be getting a new Zoom account essentially when we switch over to the new platform. And so if you could make sure that you've used this link I put in the chat to make sure you're registered for ongoing calls, we'll be making that switch this fall. So sorry for all the reminders, but we don't want to lose anyone who wants to stay in the group. And so now let me just move on and introduce our speakers. So today we're going to have our conversation moderated by one of our group members, Nicole Eovino Diebold from the CE&S Foundation in Louisville, Kentucky. And then we also have some local voices to share what's happening in their communities. So we've got Joanna Dominguez, who's Director of Education at People's Self-Help Housing. And we have Angelica Portillo, who's Director of Advocacy at Dallas Afterschool. And then we'll hear about policy opportunities from Erik Peterson, Senior Vice President of Policy at Afterschool Alliance. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Nicole to moderate the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So great to see everyone. Thank you for joining. I just wanted to start by briefly mentioning some of the things that we've seen in Louisville regarding workforce issues in the sector. So I'm sure, as is the case in many areas, COVID-19 has only exacerbated these challenges of attracting and retaining high quality professionals to the field. Our public school district in Louisville, which serves nearly 100,000 students, went to full virtual instruction when the pandemic hit in March of 2020 and did not return to in-person until the following March of 2021 as a hybrid model. So this created new demands for our community OST organizations to become learning hubs, providing in-person supports for struggling at-risk students. Fortunately, one of our partners, a local intermediate organization, was able to negotiate supports from the school district for approximately 60 OST providers, including paying substitute teachers during the school year, and then regular teachers during the summer to fill the gap in the increased supports needed for students. From a foundation standpoint, before the pandemic hit, we began convening our OST partners to discuss best practices and challenges, as well as ways to advocate for the sector with a common voice. And the group has since expanded to include others in the community. Because of those learnings, as a foundation, we have funded a number of different partnerships and pilots for trainings and resources to assist with retention efforts, as well as funding increased wages and new positions that have grown out of the needs of the pandemic. But more can be done. And so we're going to hear from some new ideas from around the country. And we will start with Joanna. So with 11 learning centers across California, I would love for you to share a little bit about the programs you run and the challenges you're facing regarding staffing.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna Dominguez. I'm the Director of Education for the Camino Scholars Program of People's Self-Help Housing. And we offer site-based education services for our residents at our affordable housing properties on California's Central Coast in the form of after-school programming for kinder through 8th grade students. And we also have college readiness support for our high school students and college students. And our program is run year-round at our on-site learning centers. We've transitioned to in-person quite some time ago in a safe manner. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to provide insight into this very important topic. We've definitely experienced challenges in hiring and retaining educators in the recent months. We have the willingness to help more students, and we've actually expanded to better fit their needs as a result of the pandemic. But oftentimes we find ourselves operating with a skeleton crew, as I'm sure many of you are doing the exact same thing. As schools open up in person and the need for our services has increased, we've especially struggled to hire qualified staff in the more rural areas. And also we continue to struggle to fill vacant positions. And as a program director, I've taken more of a bird's eye view of the situation. And I anticipate we'll be dealing with staff burnout issues if we don't do something about this real soon. And the two issues that we've been dealing with are, number one, part-time employment results in low retention and high staff turnover, especially in the areas that are such high cost of living here in California. And number two, educators are experiencing high stress levels. So the ways we've been able to work around these, we've had some successes and as we travel through this situation. And so the first one that we've been doing is we've just been doing really thorough screenings with the help of our HR department. We work really closely with them as we're screening candidates to make sure that we hire staff who are passionate about the work that we do. We need them to be very focused and passionate about working with children, and that they also match our mission. The other one that's been really successful is collaborating with local school districts. Luckily, we already had strong partnerships with a few of the local school districts that we work with, and as a result of the pandemic, that's actually increased. And so what we've done is we've gone really creative in advertising for our part-time positions. And what we do is we share the positions with the personnel from the local school districts and have them advertise to their part-time employment pool, including their substitute educators. And so what this does is it offers an opportunity for those part-time educators to work in the mornings for the school districts and then also fill our positions in the afternoon. And if it's advertised from their point, then they're more likely to apply to the position, and they know that there's no conflict of interest because it's coming directly from them. So this way, a lot of the people who have the part-time employment in the morning and then part-time employment with us are able to combine and create a more viable option with such expensive cost of living here in California. And then the other one that we do is we've actually had the opportunity to fill the need with some of our full-time staff. Our coordinators specifically are our only full-time staff currently. They normally don't work in the classroom, but during this pandemic, we've had them fill the gaps. And it's been on a temporary basis, but it's also created some great opportunities in that this has given them insight into what's going on in the classroom, and they're better able to make decisions to improve processes. Of course, when staff wear multiple hats, it poses a challenge of staff burnout. So we've created healthy outlets to allow staff to recharge. And this actually came about as a result of one of our coordinators having a stress-induced panic attack on her way to cover a site an hour drive away. So she actually had to stop at a hospital and route to the learning center and be seen in the ER. It was actually a very scary experience. And as a result, I put in preventative measures in order to have that not happen again. I've encouraged my staff to take days off due to stress and anxiety, and I've let them know it's okay to take sick leave if they need to take a day to manage all their high stress levels and anxiety. And as a preventative measure, we have mental health days now in our program. I allow my employees to use existing sick leave for self-care days to prevent illness and focus on filling their own cup. As you know, our staff is constantly filling other people's cup. And so we need to remind them that it's important to, and not only important, but okay to take days for themselves and do some self-care. And another way we've gotten creative is offering additional incentives, not necessarily monetary, for candidates and staff. We offer an education reimbursement in case they're wanting to continue on with their education. We have a health and wellness reimbursement. We've also incorporated flexible work schedules whenever possible. For example, some of our staff are able to take 980 schedules, which means that they work 9 hours a day and take every other Friday off. And then the other company policy that's been adopted is we now offer hybrid schedules where they can create a schedule that works best for them. And of course, if the position allows it, they're able to work some days from home and then other days in the office or in the classroom. And then the last way that we've been dealing with this is working towards converting our part-time positions to full-time positions. So although we've successfully helped students advance academically this past year, we need to help our own staff in order to continue producing results. I'm currently exploring options to convert all of our part-time lead positions, lead educator positions, to full-time in order to increase the retention rather than filling the majority of the positions in our after-school program with part-time staff. Of course, that's easier said than done. Our program is entirely grant funded. And so it's gonna depend on that and getting creative as far as our budget in order to fill those full-time or create those two full-time positions. So I just wanna say thank you so much for taking the time to focus on this very important topic, and I'll take it back to Nicole.
Thank you so much, Joanna. We're gonna turn it over to Angelica. So what are you seeing programs face in Dallas, and from an intermediary perspective, how are you addressing these challenges?
Yeah, this is a great question, and thanks for including our voice in this opportunity today. So 2 unique things that I've seen and we've seen as an organization is the first one is the teachers that were working after school and had no problem with it before are definitely not wanting to return to work those hours after school. Obviously, they're exhausted, and it's been a hard couple of years right now. So that's the main thing. So trying to fill those after school positions has been challenging. And the other thing is even which I find unique is the full-time manager positions for after school programs. So maybe like a program manager. So even the higher level opportunities are vacant, and they're being challenging to fill because the general pool of people applying for jobs are not necessarily trained to deliver high quality after school programming. And so as Dallas Afterschool is an agency that trains after school professionals, I get calls saying, hey, is there anyone that may have come through like your trainings that you might think be a really good fit for this opportunity? And sometimes I'm like, oh, unfortunately, no. I mean, sometimes we're trying to fill positions. But the other thing is that some of those people have also gone to becoming teachers. So they then don't see out of school time as a career path. So, recruitment and retention is definitely a challenge that we're seeing, and filling after school positions is always challenging because it's low pay and low hours. And we certainly understand that at Dallas Afterschool, and it's one of the biggest barriers that our after school programs face. So in 2017, we actually hired a consulting company to look into how do we help, our after school providers with this barrier? What do we need to do as an intermediary organization? And they came back and said, well, you need a centralized sourcing and training qualified employees to partner with after school programs. So you need to develop the partnership to figure out who can work for these programs. You need to design and execute a basic training program, and you need to create a substitute pool for your providers to come to and get employees. And I remember sitting in that meeting thinking, oh no, I do not have the skill set to be a staffing agency. Like I do advocacy work. I don't know what we're about to embark on. But fortunately, in 2019, we partnered with Strategic Focus, which is a staffing agency, to design what we call the ECOST Workforce Development Program. ECOST being for early childhood and out of school time, but for the sake of the time and topic, I'm only going to talk about the out of school time piece of this course. So when an after school provider is looking to fill vacant positions, they can work with us, and we are in the pilot phase of this. So we are only charging a $250 fee, and that after school program can have an after school professional join their team. And we do state in the contract that they cannot hire them immediately, that they do have to work with them under our contract for a year. And so this program is getting a classroom ready professional, 15 hours of service for an entire year. But what's really unique about this opportunity is that the after school professional then is getting 25 hours a week to work. They're getting paid $15 an hour. 15 of those hours are spent at the site doing, programming, whatever the site needs help with, and then 10 hours of training. If they need to find more training, they can substitute, tutor, partner with an early childhood education agency, but this can be challenging because these people are going to school or working towards a certificate. But they get paid training. They're cross-trained in early childhood education, out of school time, literacy, social and emotional learning, and CPR. After 3 months with us, they are getting career coaching, financial literacy training, and then they are also working with a Dallas College career coach. And so they're also getting scholarship help. And then another great thing is they're also getting paid medical insurance. So we have a lot of great benefits for the people that are going into this field. At this stage, it is requiring a lot of philanthropic dollars. As you can imagine, we're coordinating this effort. And right now, programs are just paying that $250 fee, and we're picking up the rest of the salary. And we have had a lot of success, though. Since the summer of 2020, we've trained 105 staff, and we've placed them in out of school time and early childhood agencies. 31 staff have participated in financial literacy and college tuition coaching. 6 are currently enrolled in college or going towards their certificate, and one staff member has completed their degree. So we're really hopeful that this is going to expand. Right now, with our capacity to do this, we have 2 early childhood agencies on board and 3 out of school time providers, with the total of 10 of the e-cost paraprofessionals to be deployed at these sites. So we're really excited to see how it works this year, and as we're just really seeing how this is going to work, but we're really hopeful for what's to come.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to encourage everyone to post your questions in the chat box if you have any for our panelists. So Erik, from a policy standpoint, I know you've been very helpful to me in thinking through some different options here locally for our out-of-school time council. Can you share a bit about what you're hearing from providers across the country and some of your ideas for short and longer term policy opportunities?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nicole. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the discussion today. Super important discussion. It was awesome to hear from Joanna and Angelica that the really creative things that they're thinking through to help address this. So yes, not a surprise to anyone. It's something that we're hearing from the field as well, from the 50 statewide after-school networks and ongoing conversations with them. It's something that they've elevated, and hearing from programs. We work closely with national providers as well, and we've had lots of conversations with them as well, in coalition and otherwise, around the challenges they're facing. I think one of the key things to realize, and again, won't be a surprise to folks, but a lot of the challenges are not necessarily unique to the after-school field, that they're being experienced by a wide range of fields. The challenges around low wages, lack of childcare actually for staff that are working in programs, and this field is uniquely situated, and we've seen some good examples of folks piloting where staff can be provided childcare for their children in the programs they're working in or in neighboring programs. Lack of advancement opportunities, potentially the unemployment benefits that have been provided by the federal government during the pandemic could be acting as a deterrent to employment. That's been documented and debated out there as well. I'll say from an education sector, the National School Boards Association has recently, flagged that they're facing serious shortages, not just seeing it in out of school time, but after school programs affiliated with school districts, but in school nutrition professionals working in the lunchroom, bus drivers, and substitute teachers are all well documented in terms of facing serious staffing shortages and recruitment challenges. I think a couple of the barriers that we've seen elevate, particular to the after school field and maybe early learning as well, is the issue around background checks. Federal and state law pertaining to a lot of the federal funding, either through the child care funding streams or other funding streams, require program staff to undergo background checks. And so when you're already facing challenges as a program to recruit staff and hire staff, and then have to go through what in some cases has been 2, 3, 6 month long waiting periods to get background checks approved, it provides that during that time, obviously the staff may find potential, or new staff may find other opportunities, and you end up losing that individual. And I will say that don't have a lot of solutions on that from a policy perspective, but it is something that's been elevated with the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. They actually have a federal interagency task force looking at this background check requirement specific to federal funding that requires it. And looking at a broad range of background check challenges, but this piece around accessibility, availability, the hours that sort of fingerprinting centers are open that often don't align with when potential staff can go and get checked, and just locations. Some states only having a handful of centers that people have to drive hours to. So they're looking at recommendations to Congress to try to address that. Another one, again, not unique to after school, but that we've heard a lot from program providers about, and it's constantly evolving, is the vaccine mask mandate prohibitions in some states and localities. Depending on the state and locality, different either mandates and requirements or prohibitions on mandates. That's been a barrier as well. We've seen some staff actually depart from providers as a result of some of those challenges, and or just making it harder to hire staff. The Federal Department of Education is looking at that, as is HHS, and developing some guidance and resources for programs with the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education, looking into it as well. But again, something that's going to be more, I think, longer term. The last things I wanted to raise real quickly are just some of the federal policy opportunities to actually support increased staff pay. And I think there was just seeing a question in there around American Rescue Plan. So most of this does come from the American Rescue Plan that passed in March, although a couple also are from the CARES Act and the CRSA that passed back in December. Really quickly, and I'll drop a link in with more information and links to all these, but the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund that hopefully most in the after school time field are familiar with, because there are set-asides for after school and summer learning. But specifically, even not just to the set-asides for after school and summer learning, all $122 billion, including the 90% that go to school districts. One of the key allowable uses that the Department of Ed has made clear in guidance and frequently asked questions is that funding can be used to support increased staff pay for a wide range of educators and education-related staff. So not just teachers. There is federal code that has to be sort of followed to make sure that the pay is sort of consistent with collective bargaining agreements and things like that, from the school district perspective. But it is an option and is something that the program providers who are partnering with school districts and potentially accessing those funds can raise. The state and local fiscal recovery fund is the second one to flag. That's the money through Treasury. It's $350 billion. That goes to every city in the country, every county, every town, and every state gets a portion of this money. And childcare workers in particular, and they specify school age as well. So youth program workers are covered after school, summer, are all sort of singled out as potential eligible employees to be used for what they call premium pay. There is a cap of $13 per hour these funds can be used to staff or overall $25,000 per year per worker. But this can also go back to back pay for staff that worked back last year, starting in March 2020, doing a lot of program providers that work with children of essential workers. And then 3 more quickly, the Child Care Stabilization grants through the American Rescue Plan that go through HHS. Those funding specifically are encouraged by HHS and guidance to be able to prioritize the funds to raise wages of childcare staff, including school-age after-school program staff, to enhance benefits, provide a wide range of personnel measures, including increasing compensation for staff and programs, health, dental, vision insurance, paid family or sick leave, retirement contributions, training, professional development can be covered with these funds, again, premium or hazard pay. Bonuses, transportation costs to and from work, recruitment and retention of existing or former workers to get staff back that maybe aren't currently working, and even things like staff access to COVID vaccines, paid time off to get to vaccine points, that kind of thing. About 14 states have already posted their grant applications for this. Again, in my link, we'll have access to that. And the rest of the states should have their grant applications as well. A lot of the caveat here is that states have some flexibility as to who the eligible providers are. But at the federal level, HHS is making very clear that license exempt school age programs, doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed provider, which we know a lot of school age programs in many states, there are barriers to licensing. And so we're hopeful, and we've seen already in Illinois, a number of states that have these opportunities out, that providers are able to apply for these funds. And then the last two, child care subsidy payments, which is another pot of child care development block grant funds. Those funds can be accessed for things like increased wages on top of, or increased premium pay on top of current wages. And then finally, last thing I would just flag is the Americorps program through the Corporation for National Community Service. There was another $1 billion in that. And hopefully, fingers crossed, in Congress, the work that they're doing right now on the Build Back Better Act could be another $1 billion possibly. And those funds, of course, through Americorps and Vista and Senior Corps are really important to the after-school field. We estimate about a third of all Americorps positions, Americorps and Americorps Vista positions, are in after-school programs. And therefore another resource to look at for programs who are facing staffing challenges. And I'll stop there, sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. So I'm curious, is there a role for funder supply? And any of you guys on the panel can answer this, but there's a lot of, particularly with the potential resources and funding capabilities through the federal government, a lot of smaller OST organizations might not have the capacity to dig into to those opportunities. So is there a role for funders in this?
I can start and then maybe defer to my co-panelists here and colleagues. I think absolutely. I think leveraging the federal streams that are out there. I think helping with some of the examples that we heard earlier in terms of providing maybe planning grants or support to help replicate successful practices that we've seen around, particularly the model, which you've seen in a number of areas too, around substitute teachers and program staff. Both of those fields, we're seeing there's, the issue of not enough hours and low pay. And so when you combine those two, potentially, not for all individuals, but for some, that may make that position more appealing if it can be coordinated and a longer workday and fair pay as well. So I think, helping from a funder perspective, helping shine a light, like what this webinar is doing, but shine a light for grantees on what some of those creative solutions out there might be. Access to kits that help. So providers don't have to recreate the wheel. Sample social media posts and other flyers, other potential emails or notices that can go out to help get the word out about available programs. Those kinds of things come to mind. I'm sure there are other ideas too. I'll defer to Angelica and Joanna.
I can speak to this topic as well. I also say absolutely they can help. Wherever possible, we try and partner with local school districts to be able to take advantage of all the funding that's available. But in some areas, that's just not possible. And some districts are more willing to work with us than others. And one successful partnership that we've had with Must Charities, which is a local wineries association, they've been able to focus in on one of our learning centers and be able to help us fund additional positions in that area specific to the learning center that's in their area. And as they're highlighting our program, our efforts on their social media, pages, that is also bringing light to our program and creating even more partnerships. So by being able to partner with local foundations, local funders, it gives way to be able to partner with other organizations. And as a result, we've now partnered with the local school district in that particular city. So just creating these collaborations is a way of strengthening our program, strengthening our funding. And it not only helps out in one of the areas that they're funding, but it also helps in other areas. So just shedding light and capitalizing on all the efforts that are out there.
Yeah, I'll just something I think about whenever we are working with the city government, that's who we mostly work with and trying to get funding and for after school programs, is that a lot of that funding is going, and Erik referenced it, a lot of it's going to licensed providers, but in Dallas particularly, we have a lot of programs that are not licensed. And so helping them navigate, you know, city funding is hard because you have to be a licensed program, especially for federal government. So just being mindful that, you know, there are a lot of great programs that are not licensing, because licensing can be expensive and difficult at some times, but these are still high quality programs, and they're having staffing challenges as well.
We did have a comment in the chat from Elizabeth Gaines. She said, I've been thinking since we are in a growth industry, we need a national recruitment strategy. I keep thinking of the "We Want You" for the U.S. Army posters. It needs to be compelling, well-paid, and low bar of entry. Funders could support that. Thoughts from panelists?
Agreed. This is an idea I think that several folks I know several of the national out-of-school time providers that I've talked to are having conversations and collaborating and thinking about this, because again, it is sort of cross-cutting. So being able to come together, share resources, and cooperate on something, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it'll take a lot of collaboration thinking, you know, between intermediaries and like, where are you going to recruit from and how are you going to entice them to come to an after-school part-time opportunity. So something like we're doing at Dallas Afterschool, it just takes a lot of coordinating with different entities to make it a viable option for a part-time opportunity. But I think it's a great idea.
If you want quality people, you got to pay more. And I cringe when I hear the word childcare, because we are not childcare facilities. We provide so much more. And I like to say that we do the work in our after school programs that teachers just don't have time for in their classroom. So the work that we do is just as important as the work that's being done in the school districts. And so as a result, you have to pay in order to provide quality education.
Can I just say really quick, John, I totally agree with you. And I feel the same way. Unfortunately, from a policy perspective, a lot of the funding streams that can be used for youth development, positive youth development, and after school and summer learning are in the childcare, use the term childcare, but totally agree with you.
Thank you guys so much. This has been great and so helpful. And I think we're going to go to our breakout sessions where we can dive in a little bit deeper. And then we'll come back.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Nicole, for moderating. Jesse from GFE is going to split us into breakout groups just to talk about this a little bit more and see what's happening in your community. In the chat, I'm going to put in there a link to a note catcher. So each of us will be in one of those breakout rooms to help the conversation and try and capture notes, but anyone is welcome to add notes into that document. And then we'll come back at the end and close it out. So Jesse, take us away. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had some rich conversations to hear what's happening in other folks' communities. I put that note catcher back in the chat in case you want to take a look and see what was happening in the different breakout groups. So I want to say a huge thank you to our speakers today. Thank you, Angelica, Joanna, Erik, and Nicole for moderating. As you can see, I think we've just sort of begun the conversation around these immediate challenges, and there's much more to be discussed as we go deeper together this fall, both among providers and intermediaries, researchers, and the funder community. I think this inclusive group where everyone represents different perspectives is really helpful to get the conversation going. So just a couple things to close us out. I want to remind you that we'll skip October's monthly call because of the GFE conference. So for any funders on the call, I hope you have registered for the virtual conference and there's still time to do so. There are quite a few out-of-school time-focused sessions that you can take advantage of. And then one more time, just if you have not re-opted into these calls, I'll put that link back in the chat. So make sure you've signed up to remain on the mailing list. And otherwise, look out for information for the continuation of these discussions in November and December. And Kathleen had put in the chat earlier that if you have ideas or suggestions for what you would like covered in those sessions around building a pipeline of diverse leadership and some of the more structural infrastructure that's needed for the field and the workforce, we would welcome those ideas, suggestions, speakers, or questions that you'd like addressed. And thank you for everyone who facilitated the groups. There was a question about non-funders at the conference. The conference is for funders for only, so sorry about that. It is for the funder audience, but we have lots of practitioner voices in there. So we're getting some good messages to the funders. This space, the Friday monthly stakeholder calls are designed specifically to be wide and broad reaching and inclusive of everybody. I think that's about it. Kathleen, anything else before we close out?
No, just a thank you again for everybody and engaging in the small groups and particularly our panelists. I just learned so much about what's happening both on the ground and also Erik, thanks for your really comprehensive overview of what's going on. So we are also starting with the funders a bi-monthly call where we're going to take some of the themes that come up in these calls and then push, and I say that with all the love, funders, push you to think about what's happening in your own strategic investments. And there was so much that came up today that I'm really excited to continue this conversation and also, continue the conversations with the full group through the fall. So thanks, Rebecca, for all of your work on this, and have a terrific weekend, everybody.